I really love saying this. We, as of 2025, are officially the birding capital of Canada. There have been more birds seen here than anywhere else, any other county in Canada. We currently sit at 432, with our most recent additions being the pine warbler found by Simon Dakes and this pair of taiga bean geese that are still hanging out in Port Renfrew. So if you ever wonder, why is the birding here so good? How does it compare to the rest of Canada? We're in a pretty special place. Not everyone in the world gets all the cool migrants that we do. But yeah. So who am I? My name is Liam Ragan, as many of you know. I've volunteered since with Rocky Point since about 2020. Sitting on the board since 2022. I also serve as the volunteer First Nations liaison, helping us to build relationships with local First Nations communities around bird conservation. Professionally, I work for BC Nature as the coordinator for key biodiversity areas. So a lot of the same stuff, got to make sure to switch my hats strategically there. But uh, but yeah, I'm just gonna move my thing around here. So what is a big year? There have been some really good depictions of what big years are in popular media. If anyone hasn't read any of these or seen the movie The Big Year, I highly recommend it. Another really good one that recently came out was Listers, which cannot recommend more highly if you're okay with a little bit of swearing. But yeah, basically a big year is an attempt to see as many species of birds as possible within a given area, sometimes the world, as is the case with Birding Without Borders, but usually within a geographic bound. As for why people do them, I really love this quote by Noah Stryker, who broke the world big year record, which was, "It was true that my list motivated me to explore the world and measure progress, but the list itself was no more descriptive than a phone book, a crude proxy for the richness beyond numbers or words." Big years start off as this silly little thing to get a number as big as you can make it, but intrinsically they force you to ask questions like, which parts of this area are important to birds? Where are birds going? Why are they going there? And also who else lives there? Who is birding there? Who can help me find this stuff and get back in one piece. Another quote I like is this one: "Birding isn't about the wonder of nature and man's search for beauty. It's about finding rare shit and being the best." David Sibley did not say this. This is a joke. Please do not misattribute this one. But jokingly, it's also just fun to compete. We all know that as birders. Lists are fun. So Vancouver Island, I assume most of the people here are from Vancouver Island or living on Vancouver Island, so I won't spend too much time on this. But it is worth asking, if we're doing a big year and saying we're only going to count birds on Vancouver Island, what does that mean? Do we go by the political boundaries? If so, we get almost up to the caribou. Do we go by ecological boundaries? What does that mean? What does it mean to have a marine exclusive economic zone? Can I actually go 200 kilometers out to sea? Probably not. That might start to feel a little bit cheating. So for my big year, I chose to define it as, if the closest piece of land is Vancouver Island, you are in the broader ecological Vancouver Island. I did that because I really view Vancouver Island as much a community as it is an island itself. It wouldn't feel fair to cut out, say, Salt Spring, Galliano, some of these islands that we know so well and which really feel like part of our birding community. As well as, what if it's an islet that's like 500 feet off? Does that count? I think it's part of Vancouver Island. So for just a couple examples here, you can see Texada Island, way closer to the mainland, not up for grabs. Hornby Island, way closer to us. Sisters Islets here is about 1.5 nautical miles closer to Vancouver Island than it is to the nearest point of the mainland. So that technically counts within what I define as ecologically Vancouver Island. And if that seems like a niche example, who's going to go to Sisters Islets? We did. It was awesome. There are breeding Arctic terns out there. I cannot recommend it more highly. It is such a cool place. One of my highlights of the whole year was actually snorkeling here off Sisters Islets after we found the breeding terns, and some of the highest numbers of juvenile rockfish I've ever seen in my life. And I was swimming through a huge school of these rockfish, and all of a sudden they all disappeared. And I was looking around like, what happened? They didn't seem to mind me before. And I hear something, and I look up, and there's a pair of Arctic terns hovering 3 feet above my head that are there to catch rockfish, and they had all just booked it. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend getting out there to see them. So why 2024? There's a couple reasons for that. One is climatic. It was a really good year in terms of we were switching over from an El Nino into a La Nina year. If you don't know what that means, El Nino basically is when hot weather is coming over from Asia and Australia over to the Eastern Pacific. La Nina is when the whole cycle shifts and all that hot air and water is getting blown from us over to Asia and Australia. When in those years when we have a switchover event is often when we get the highest lists in the Pacific, because just more birds are getting lost, more birds are showing up. It can be a good year statistically to see a lot of birds. For those curious, we're in an El Nino year right now. It should be quite a hot summer, which is part of why today on the boat we saw things like lots of brown pelicans. Hard to correlate the common terns to it because we don't really know what's going on with those shifting populations, but we very likely will see some really interesting southern birds this year. So keep an eye out. Another reason 2024, this is a Pacific herring spawn. Pacific herring spawns are when, as the name suggests, millions, if not billions, of Pacific herring come into bays and areas of coastline and spawn all at once. When they do that, it's both visible from space and brings in the tens to hundreds of thousands to sometimes even millions of birds to those spawns. And we have quite a few of them on Vancouver Island. They happen about March and April. And I bring that up because, as I said before, working for BC Nature, my job is quantifying the most important places for birds and biodiversity to help get them recognized and work with communities to protect them. What that means in terms of herring is I end up going to a lot of herring spawns like this. And so in 2024, I knew I was going out to just about every major herring spawn on Vancouver Island. And that I think is representative of I have a job with a lot of flexibility and which is already bringing me to places that are pretty incredible for birds when there's a lot of birds there. I got to be at Tofino Shorebird Festival as the lead shorebird guide for Raincoast Education Society, which, obviously cut down the cost and put me in a really good place at a really good time. I got to be out at these herring spawns everywhere from Barkley Sound to the Heshka Peninsula to Port McNeill up in the north, which just made it fiscally feasible to do something like this as a relatively early career ornithologist. But just the flexibility to be able to drop everything, go meet volunteers, and see a rare bird here and there. Uh, for those of you who remember the big gating of 2024, we just happened to have a lot of incredible birds at January 1st. And here's where I should say I was not planning on doing a big year in 2024. I knew at some point I wanted to do one, but we all think about doing bird things at some point. It wasn't something I had really concretely thought about. But then January 1st came around, and we had the white-breasted nuthatch and pygmy nuthatches hanging out in at the cemetery here in Victoria. And the summer tanager had been sticking around for a while, and it was up in Sydney. And those were, all pretty incredible birds for Vancouver Island. Pygmy nuthatch, I think our last one before 2024 was 87, give or take, so almost half a century. White-breasted nuthatch every couple of years. I think that was our first summer tanager. No, we'd had two or three summer tanagers before, but very, very rare. And so I've kind of started the spark of like this would be a really good year to do this if I was going to do that. But no, that's crazy. That's crazy. And then come mid-January, we had another bird show up, which kicked me into overdrive and made me realize, you know what, this is the year to do that. And that was this hooded oriole up in Duncan. This one came through, and I think we all got the notification, but it was in a 55 plus community that was not open to visitors. And really wanting to see this bird, sent some messages around and actually ended up gaining access through my cousin who works at a retirement home in Duncan and had some connections. And this homeowner very graciously let me and a couple of friends into this 55 plus gated community. And we got this, and it was on the drive back that my friends Hannah and Ava really said that you got to do it. You've been talking about this for years. We just saw this hooded oriole, which again, amazing bird for Vancouver Island. When better, but now. Timing's never going to be better. Here are those same friends on that same year doing herring spawn work with me, who really bullied me into it, slash, gave me the push to do what I already knew I wanted to do. So that's why 2024. So what is the goal? First, we'll start with the benchmark. Anne Nightingale, who is here with us now. Anne Nightingale was, to the best of my knowledge, the first person to seriously do a big year for Vancouver Island, seeing 269 species in 2015, all while raising funds for Rocky Point. She both proved that this could be done, set an idea of how many birds could be seen, and throughout the whole year gave me a mountain of advice on how to stay alive. I, for example, took the Coho ferry across to Port Angeles during the middle of a bomb cyclone, and she very kindly told me how to not fall overboard and die, which was great because it did come a bit close to that. She gave me advice on which parts of the island to go to at different times, as well as who I should work with in those parts of the island to, again, get out to places safely. And I bring that up because one of the first things a lot of people ask me when I say I tried to break the Vancouver Island Big Year record is, oh, did Anne try and sabotage you? Did someone try and give you misinformation? I go, absolutely not. That's not the type of community we have here. We're all trying to, raise awareness and funds for birds here. And if any of you have birded on the East Coast, there are places where that very much will happen. I once again refer back to the movie The Big Year. Highly recommend. So with that in mind, I set the goal of breaking the record and seeing 275 species, raising awareness, so giving talks such as this, and working with not just going to see birds, but also the organizations that were conserving them around the island, and raising $10,000 for Rocky Point Bird Observatory. So in my attempt to do this, I birded a lot. This is every checklist I submitted over the course of 2024. You'll notice there's really only one region of the island I didn't get to, and that's the sort of checklist at Bay, Cayuga Islands there, which don't have a lot of unique birds you couldn't see anywhere else, so didn't really justify the thousands of dollars getting out there. But aside from that, sort of no stone unturned. The year in numbers, which I will save the end number till the end, but for an idea of how much work went into this, let me see. Submitted 1,309 checklists, so about four checklists a day. I eBirded for 1,104 hours straight. Do the math if you want. I've blacked that out. I did checklist kilometers of about 3,821 kilometers, meaning that was the distance traveled while I was running checklists. And I reported 536,659 individual birds on eBird. So again, going back to Anne's talk from previously, part of this too was if I'm going to do this, I got to give back to the community. So I'm going to put everything I see onto eBird. People always ask at the end of this talk too, how many kilometers did I put on my car? And we don't really talk about that, but it's somewhere in the 60 to 70,000 range. It wasn't great, but the car did great, and it's a hybrid, so that was not too painful. Yeah. So for the highlights of the year, I'm going to be going through the luckiest ticks. So, what was the most serendipitous things that I found that almost couldn't be planned for? What were my favorite birds? What were my hardest chases? And what were my most frustrating misses, as every big year has? I also, at the end, have put in some new information on my recommendations for the next people who are going to try and break this record, or anyone doing a big year anywhere. So, with that, hardest chases. This one is a bar-tailed godwit that I've funnily enough is not from Island View. This is a much easier to see bar-tailed godwit I saw later in the year that showed up at Whiff and Spit that I obviously did not know was going to show up at Whiff and Spit. The one that I got at Island View, I was just finishing work. It was around 3 p.m. And I had the afternoon off. And I was finishing up a meeting, and I get a notification on WhatsApp that, oh my God, Bartail Godwit, end of Island View. And I really quickly pull up the map and go, okay, if I catch the last ferry, I will have exactly 1 hour to run to the tip of Island View, or not Island View, of Sydney Spit, and back to catch the last ferry off of the island. Otherwise, I will be stuck there at night. And so I take off, rip off to Sydney, catch that last ferry that makes it possible. And there's a couple other birders on there, and I let them know, hey, look, I ran the numbers. If you don't want to be stuck here, we need to sprint. Like this is going to be really cutting it close. We need to go fast if we don't want to be stuck here tonight. And so, boat's pulling in, boat hasn't even docked yet. I jump onto the dock and just take off. And I look back and they're kind of like, yeah, God, wait, let's go for a slow walk. And I'm like, oh God, that's going to be a problem for later. So run through. By the time I'm going there, the tide is coming up really fast, and I'm already in about knee-high water getting out to the teardrop at the end of Sydney Spit, which is a bit worrying. Also because the other two birders who came out that day are quite a bit shorter than I am, so my knees is maybe their thighs. So I get out there, it's there, I see it. I'm, really excited. It's a lifer for me. I've never seen the bird before. And, take a couple photos, turn around and just sprint. By the time I'm sprinting back, water is up to about my waist. Like the tide is coming in, the current is going over the neck of the spit. If you get pulled out in that, like we're in a Coast Guard situation. I run into them about halfway back and I'm like, guys, you got to bail on this. Like the tide is coming up. B, we have 25 minutes to get back to the ferry or we'll be left here overnight. At which point you'll either be in the ocean or soaking wet on an island with no way to get off. And they go, oh no, I'm going to keep going. I'm like, your call. Again, I'm not naming who these people were, but if you went back and looked at eBird records, you could maybe find out. Thankfully for everyone involved, the bird then flies from the tip out over us, and we pointed out, and they decide not to go into what I really think would have been a bad situation. But as it's flying over us on the way back, we all take it, run back. That we had to wait about 10 minutes to take the last ferry off, and everyone's looking at my binoculars, and these birders who are slowly walking towards us, going like, "Oh, you suck. Why are you doing this?" I'm like, "I don't know these people. I'm not with them. Like, I'm here on time. I ran. I got back on time." But they did not get left on the island. They did not get swept out to sea. We saw the bar-tailed godwit, and then an incredibly easy one that was like 100 feet off a road showed up a few months later. But I'm really glad to have worked harder for this first one because it was something. Second hardest chase is this American three-toed woodpecker. For those who don't know, we have a small population of breeding American three-toads on the center of the island. They breed up at the subalpine zone. They're relatively widely spread throughout that subalpine of the middle island. Although getting to the subalpine is obviously quite a haul. And because they're so sparse in that habitat, it takes a lot of attempts. Roughly calculating this, I did 8 attempts for American three-toed, with something like 45 hours of searching the subalpine before on my last attempt, at which point I was dealing with a bit of a ankle injury and kind of wondering like, I'm not going to be able to make too many more trips to the alpine. Like if I don't get it soon, I might have to bail on my alpine birds here. Stopped to tie my shoe and heard that pick, 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 look up right there. So one of those ones that just, right place, right time, and putting in the hours. And also, huge thank you to Bruce, who gave me inordinate numbers of pins. Went snowshoeing with me when I tried for this in, February, and then gave me tons and tons of information throughout the year that kind of both kept me motivated and kept me pointed in the right direction. Tied for second, and in a very similar category, is white-tailed ptarmigan. For those who don't know, again, we have a population of white-tailed ptarmigan on most higher mountains on Vancouver Island. It's an endemic subspecies. It's by far the largest of the white-tailed ptarmigans, and again, only found on Vancouver Island, which is quite cool. They only took me 3 attempts, although one attempt, you'll notice in that bottom left corner, was up by Gold River. I thought I had, hacked the system and found a much more accessible white-tailed ptarmigan that didn't require an 8-hour hike. And I went out there with work to do some black swift surveys and ate from a somewhat dubious fast food place on the way. And about halfway up this mountain, started thinking like, "Ooh, I'm not feeling so good. It'll be fine. It'll be fine." 3 quarters up the mountain, I'm like, I'm really not feeling good. I don't think I'm gonna camp here and do the black swift surveys, but like I'm already on. I've driven up to Gold River. I'm gonna try and see these ptarmigan. I have the pin for where someone found a nest. Like, let's go see if it's there. So I drop all my gear and basically crawl the last quarter of the way up the mountain and get to where the nest had been and find just scat, nothing. Search all around the peak in about 2 feet of snow, nothing, nothing, nothing. Finally decide I gotta get off this mountain. I'm really not doing well. Like safety wise, it's time to leave. And so basically throw myself down the mountain, get to the car, get back to Gold River around 11 p.m., feeling like maybe need to go to a doctor, not well. Go to the one place in Gold River that is open this late, which is a tiny little convenience store that doesn't sell a lot. And I'm like, I need to get electrolytes in me. I'm just going to buy whatever they have. So I get a bunch of mango juice and start just chugging mango juice in this little motel room down there. And I start being like, man, okay, I felt bad. Now I feel like really not good. Turns out I'm allergic to mango juice. Crazy news to me. I've eaten mangoes my whole life. So there I am in this motel in Gold River thinking like, if this is how I go, this is how I go, I guess. But thankfully did not go. Did a hike after that at Aerosmith, which, another 12 hours or so, and then finally got it on 5040 Mountain near Tofino. If anyone is looking to see white-tailed ptarmigan, my top by far no comparison recommendation now is 5040. There is a Alpine Club of Canada cabin that they built at the summit. It's about hour and a half, 2 hour hike to that cabin, which has gas, food, tea, water, beds really critically, so you don't have to really hike much up with you. We brought some stuff to do some repairs on the cabin as part of a Alpine Club of Canada trip because they wanted to learn how to do bio blitzes, and we showed them how to look for plants and things. And yeah, they were right there. Like it's relative to any other hike you're going to do for ptarmigan, it's pretty easy. And having a cabin you can sleep in means both less gear and it's just really nice. So yeah, 50/40. But the number one hardest chase of the year, I believe, is this American bittern. This was probably one of the first birds I really chased for the big year. For those who don't know, there is one, maybe two American bittern that seem to spend the winter at Buttertub's Marsh in Nanaimo. Um, this one took me 7 attempts, so not as many as the three-toed woodpecker, but with the three-toed woodpecker, every attempt was like a beautiful hike through the subalpine where you sweat and you felt good and you saw other great birds and Canada jays frolicked and real Snow White type situation. This is just standing in a marsh. For those of you who've been to Buttertubs, it's great, but you don't want to spend 20 hours standing in it looking at reeds that all look like an American bitter, none of which are. So total, that was about 27 hours of between driving to Nanaimo over 7 attempts and standing around in Nanaimo looking for this thing. I was kind of on the edge in February of like, maybe I shouldn't do a big year. This is nuts. Why am I spending my time doing this? And I was actually on the phone with my grandma being like, yeah, I'm having a good time, but like this is a lot of time standing in Buttertub's Marsh when this thing just takes off from right next to me and I watch it fly over the marsh. I'd go, I gotta go right back, snap this photo. And what was really cool about this too was I took a pin of where I thought it had flown from and where it had flown to, and I sent it to my friends in Nanaimo who've been trying to see this bird. And they went back the next day at the same time, and it did the exact route, exact same patch to the exact same patch with the exact same time after or before sunset. And people went the next couple of days, and for about a week, it had the exact same, like to the minute pattern of where it would fly. So a lot of people got to see it after this, which was really cool. And they didn't have to put in, 20 plus hours. So that was nice. Honorable mention, this sparrow very nearly tore my rotator cuff, or it didn't, but I fell down a mountain looking for it. And then one showed up on the beach and wasn't that great. And I didn't tear my rotator cuff. But there's been lots of physio as a result of this, the lark sparrow. And another honorable mention and tribute to the kindness of strangers. This blue jay showed up on Quadra Island, and it took me 3 trips to Quadra to get it. And it was in a very kindly man's yard who, I messaged him was like, hey, if you're not comfortable with this, that's totally fine. I don't want to impose. But here's what I'm doing. Here's raising money, et cetera, et cetera. Would you mind if I come and look for this blue jay that's in your yard? And he goes, absolutely. And so I come by and spent, 3 days over the course of 3 trips, just spending dawn to dusk sitting in this guy's orchard. His wife came out and hung out. His kids came over and were talking to me. One of them had a sleepover, and I explained to like 5, 10-year-olds that I was looking for a blue jay. He brought me coffee regular. Like it was pushing the boundaries of how kind someone can be. I definitely have a cosmic debt. And on the third one, showed up and it was right there immediately, eating peanuts on the trampoline. So, sometimes it really is just going enough times. So those were the hardest chases. My favorite moments. This was my northern pygmy owl for the big year, number 147. This was up in Courtney, and I was not looking for a northern pygmy owl because this was not in the mountains. This was in the middle of a suburb. I was actually there looking for Harris's sparrow with a couple of my friends after we've been doing some work out in Barkley Sound. And we knew there'd been one there. I knew that it's a rare enough bird, there might not be another one. So I had to put some time into this Harris's sparrow. And so we spent about 3, 4 hours wandering all these yards, looking for it, couldn't find it. And we're about to go. One of my friends went off to grab dinner for us while we did our last count. And as we're driving out, I see this big brown thing in a bush, and I'm going, "Oh my God, Harris's sparrow!" And I put my bins up, like, "Wait a minute, what?" And there was just this owl sitting in a flock of sparrows, obviously not a Harris's sparrow. And so it was just really cool to see. And then as we're watching it, at this point, it is almost dark. I hear these chips and I go, that's not a golden crown or a white crown. I think I know what that is. And so we take off about a block away and find the Harris's sparrow at sunset hanging out in someone's yard. We couldn't see it, we could just hear it. And obviously with a sparrow, we want to make sure we have the right thing. So we got the thermal out and ended up high beaming this thing with the car in a bush to find it and then, put the lights down and just kind of appreciate it for a sec. But again, kind of one of those serendipitous just birds falling out of the sky happening to you when you put the time in. Second favorite experience of the trip was this Costas hummingbird. Um, I this one was really cool. This is a bird that I would not have seen if it wasn't for Anne Nightingale, and sent me a message. She was in We Love Hummingbirds Facebook group, something like that, and someone said, "Wow, look at this strange thing I have in my yard up on Quadra Island again." And I stupidly misread the message as calliope, which again, interesting hummingbird. There was a lot of them in the interior. They're quite rare on Vancouver Island. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go for that. I'm already going up to Port Hardy in 2 days to go look for goshawks. I'll go in, I'll go then. And so go up, go over. Same thing. Homeowner says they hadn't let anyone go at this point, but they said that it would be okay for me to go. And I'm going there expecting a calliope, which I've seen hundreds of in the interior, but are still, really good bird for Vancouver Island. My friend who'd come over from Idaho, where calliope are one of the most common birds, full stop. When we're taking the ferry over to Quadra, goes like, I've seen a lot of calliope. I don't know. And I'm like, Quadra's pretty cool. Come on over. He goes, okay, fine. Like, whatever, I'll join you. So we're standing in this yard chatting with one another, and the homeowner, really nice lady, trains guard dogs for a living. So like some really crazy German shepherds around that was nice she had on leash. And as we're talking to her, this not calliope, but Costas hummingbird flies up in our face, and we both grab each other and go, "Holy shit! That's that's not a calliope. That's like a BC 30th, 40th record Costas hummingbird, way rare." So she goes, "Yeah, of course. I told you it was a Costas. I had just misheard." What was really cool about this though is, we talked to her for about an hour, and she said, "You know what? Okay, I am all right with people coming to my yard." Very strict rules about exactly when we organized like birding chaperones to bring community members over from Comox and bring them to the yard. Because again, this wasn't just like we should be careful with this yard. This was like, I have off-leash attack dogs, and if you trespass, they could just kill you. Like they're trained to kill people. You really should not come here when you shouldn't. And we managed to not only get a bunch of people to see the Costas hummingbird, but had no one mauled by an attack dog, which I would say is an even bigger win. But for my all-time favorite bird of the big year, we were looking for goshawk up by Naka Creek, which, for those who don't know, a small creek system up by Sayward on the north side of the island. And the campsite that we set up as we were searching around for goshawk, pretty frequently we were hearing ruffed grouse, and we went, man, it'd be really cool to get a good look at that ruffed grouse, especially because my friend from Carter from Idaho, he'd never seen Vancouver Island ruffed grouse, which have a totally different drumming pattern and different plumage than everywhere else in North America. And so we went out and found the log that it was drumming on because it had scat, and you could really see that it was being used quite a bit by this grouse. And we're looking around going, man, we should build a blind so we can get close to this and watch. And kind of, just as an off quip, go, man, if only we had some netting. And we look down, there's a whole section of hunter's netting all over the floor. And we go, oh, divinely, divinely blessed. So we spend about an hour building this, fern and salal and huckleberry blind, and think, I hope we haven't scared the grouse off. So we go back to camp. We wait a little while. The next morning, we get up really early, and we come back, hide behind the blind, and we watch the grouse walk up and get onto the log and just start drumming and drumming and drumming. And we're like, wow, really quiet because we don't want to disturb the grouse. Like, wow, 10 feet away. This is so cool. I've never seen one this close. And we've been there maybe 30 seconds and are just starting to take a few photos when Ava in the back here starts going, Ava, shut up. Like, what are you doing? Like we just and like the grouse takes off and they're like, Ava, what the hell? And we look on the branch next to us and there's a Pacific martin at like eye level, 3 feet away staring at us. We all go, holy shit. And it jumps through our blind and takes off after this rough grouse. And we're all standing there like, we spent all this time on this blind. Did we really do this just so a freaking martin could eat our grouse? Like this sucks. But that was quite cool. We went back, the next morning, grouse was back. It did not get eaten by a martin. Got some really cool video of it doing its full, display. And yeah, it was just lovely. It was one of those ones of, bird found with friends by friends. We got the goshawk as well. It was, saw it buzzing over a clear cut. So, not the most amazing sighting, but still just a really cool bird to see. And yeah, so that was kind of my one of my top experiences for the year, birding wise and martin wise, I guess. Most frustrating dips. So, for those who don't know, a dip is when you try to see a bird and fail. So, something circumstantial like, Mark Maffei had a brown booby offshore over the course of the year. That's not a dip. There's no way I could have seen that. If I went looking for the Nazca or for the brown booby, then it would be a dip. Glaucous gull. 2024 was actually the only year I have not seen a glaucous gull on Vancouver Island. So, riddle me that. Again, the best if you paid me $1 million to find you a glaucous gull on Vancouver Island, I would say, not too hard. Just go out to the herring spawns. They're usually one or two kicking around at the odd herring spawn. You just got to look through them. As I said, I worked at every herring spawn on Vancouver Island in 2024, putting dozens of hours into looking for one of these. There was one that was seen up in Qualicum that I put about, I don't know, 10, 15 hours into trying to find, no luck. And then when I was out at Heskett for a week on the west side of the island, is like as close as you can get to a guaranteed glaucous skull site. Um, the day that I left, with my field team still there, get the text, how far are you? Can you turn around? Like, no, I'm already, up to Comox. What's up? And they go, the glaucous skull just showed up. It spent like a week and a half right in front of our field house. Like you could see it from the place that had been my bedroom. But getting out to Heskett, if you don't have a reason to be there, that is a day and a half of transit and a heck of a lot of gas. And as much as I would have loved to have come up with some work reason to get out there and get back for it, wasn't going to happen. So that's one for the history books. Second most frustrating, American white pelican. These are still my nemesis for Vancouver Island. I cannot for the life of me catch up with an American white pelican. I don't know what it is. I've had them fly over my house before. Will I get messages like, "Oh, they just came through your yard," um, which basically happened in 2024. I spent a lot of time kind of looking for the odd one that was spending time between estuaries, and showed me a really good spot, sort of up by Sydney, where you could just see down into Sydney Lagoon, where sometimes during migration they'll go and rest. Spent a lot of time up there looking, no luck. And I was actually at BC Nature's AGM, and there have been some in the area. So I'm like, any chance I'm not, either at the AGM or anything, I'm looking for them out on the shoreline. And I'm giving my end of year report for the program that I manage, and I'm reading off my phone my speaking notes, and my phone just starts blowing up. People messaging about the rare bird alerts, and me being like, "There's white pelicans. They're headed towards Qualicum. Like they're coming up." And I'm getting live reports as they're flying up the coast, and I'm trying to get rid of them because it's my job. I have to like do this report on the program to like 300 people. And I finally get the notification they are over the Qualicum Rec Center. Like they are flying over the building you are in, and I'm just like, please stick around, please. And they did not. That was their last flight of the year. They went straight off to the Caribou from there, never to be seen again. Which, if I could do it all over, I don't think I'd change a thing. I'm glad I didn't shirk work to go look at one bird, but man, that hurt. But for most frustrating, this is not a photo I took in 2024 of a sharp-tailed sandpiper. This is a photo I took of a sharp-tailed sandpiper in 2023 when I found one with my friend James. But in 2024, one spent about a week and a half at Incinerator Rock in Tofino. And I went to Tofino, I think 5 times to try and see this sandpiper. And I genuinely think not only was I the only person to look for this bird and not see it, I may have been the only person to have not seen it on their first try. I found this thing's prints. Like I could see in the sand, people would send me a photo of like, oh, it was here 2 minutes ago. And I would spend hours scouring the rack line, looking in the sand, checking behind every piece of kelp, every boulder. Nothing. I could not believe. And like again, the number of people would send me photos of like it was literally here 5 minutes ago, and I don't know what you're talking about. Um, can't be too frustrated. A lot of time in Tofino, that was great. And I found a really great ice cream place I now love and adore and doesn't give me too many traumatic memories. But man, that was a lot of time for one bird that never showed up and really should have. As with everything, there's a lot of honorable mentions. You spend a year trying to see every single bird you can get in a year, and a lot don't pan out. Broadwing hawk should have just happened. I can't believe I didn't connect with one. I was a little cocky. I thought I could get one from Mount Ptolemy and without going out to East Souk. And when I realized it was getting late in the season, I put 3 days into just hawk watching all day at East Souk and nothing. There was one snowy owl that showed up in Sydney that I literally went around and put pamphlets up, being like, "If this bird comes back, if you see this, like I will pay you if you find this owl and tell me it is back, never returned." While I was campaigning, putting up pamphlets, a little gull flew by Beachy, which was like 5 kilometers from where I was putting up these pamphlets. Again, nothing you're gonna get there. And then the red-headed woodpecker, which was a BC first that showed up on Galliano. We after it showed up as we were on the boat over to Sisters Islet for the Arctic turn, and we did the Arctic turn, we did our snorkeling, and on the way back we went to go to Galliano, and I was going to spend the night. And we were on the ferry from the mainland to Salt Spring to catch the Salt Spring Galliano ferry, and we've just pulled on, and we're sitting there, and I'm kind of thinking like, huh, what's the Galliano schedule again? And I check my phone and see like, oh God, and I get on like, hey, please, can we get off the ferry? There was no, there was the last ferry to Salt Spring of the day. We would have just been stuck on Salt Spring all night with nothing to do. So they very kindly let us reverse off a ferry, which I don't know if it's ever happened before. And then we drove to Victoria, woke up at 5 a.m., went back, but the redheaded did not make a second appearance. It was a 1 day wonder. And then Clark's Creek, which drove me a little bit nuts. That one we were doing an eagle wing tour out to Juan de Fuca, and we went out as far as Port Renfrew. And I had been guiding at that point for close to 9 hours straight as we were pointing birds out to people. And I went down to use the washroom. And when I come back up, I get a text from Joachim, "You just drove past a Clark's grave." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And so we quickly, like start looking, nothing, nothing. But we're like, we have burnt all of our time. Like we're already so late to get back to Victoria. They're, the captain just says like, this is the one time we have to call it. Like we're gonna get back in the dark if we keep looking for this bird. And so that sucked. But big years are not all about missing birds. Big years are also about getting really lucky and serendipity. So some of my luckiest birds from the year. American golden plover. I believe this was one of only one, maybe two American golden plover that were reported on the island that year. And this one, I just happened, Dave Bell was in town and we went out sea watching out at Otter Point. And I'd forgot my bins in the car, and I just start going up, and we hear the typical call right above, and I turn to Dave like, "Is that what I think it was?" And he goes, "That's an American golden plover. There is nothing else that could be." And one of those things, if I hadn't been standing exactly there, exactly then, there was no way I was getting that bird any other way. Hudsonian Godwit. Like I said, I got to be the birder in residence for Tofino Shorebird Festival, guiding people down at Hotel Z in 2024, and I've done it every year since. It's a pretty cool time. And this one, I would just finished guiding, and I was just laid back into bed, and I get a text from Ian and shoot right back up, and he says, "Hudsonian Godwit, run, like run." And so I take off, go drive faster than I should from Hotel Z down to Incinerator Rock and just sprint the entire way up to Schooner's Cove. And on my way, I run into these two people I just guided that morning, and they come to stop me and go, "Oh, can you help us figure out this one loon ID?" And I go, "No time for loons. Come with me. It's only in Glenfit." And they sprint with me, and we get there, and it's in the bay. We show up. It's right there. It's feeding. I'm like on the verge of throwing up from sprinting this whole way. It looks at us. It looks around. It takes off, and it never comes back. It was one of those just one and done. That was the only time it was going to be in that bay. And so I'm like fist bumping and really excited and look down. There's this mannequin at my feet of a fist bumping action figure. So I kind of kept that as a bit of a, good luck charm. Some other honorable mentions for luckiest birds. Rough. I just happened to be driving through Comox and get the text of like, "Hey, are you in Comox?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm like 5 minutes away from the air park. What's up?" And they go, "Just come to the air park. There's a rough here for you." And I go, "Oh, terrific. That's handy. Glad I didn't have to drive up to Comox for that." And then similarly, ash-throated flycatcher. I was coming back from Tofino, and it was dark. I was planning to get back into town at night, and this ash-throated flycatcher gets reported at like post dusk. It's too dark to look for it that day. So Ava's family actually, they say, "Yeah, good, no worries, come and stay with us. Like, spend the night." And I go out the next morning, and we search for about 5 hours. Can't find it, can't find it, can't find it. We're starting to think, man, this bird might have flown the coop. And as I'm kind of starting to think I might need to leave, this this guy dog walker walks by and he goes, "Oh, are you a bird watcher?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, bins everything." And he goes, "Come in my yard." And I'm like, "Oh, do you know the bird we're looking for?" And he goes, "No, it's just really good birding in my yard." And we go, "Oh, okay." And we go into his yard and it's just right there in a tree. And like, "Oh." Okay, and we asked, like, "Did you know we were looking?" He goes, "No, it's just a really good yard." And we watch it for about a minute and it goes back down and it's never seen again. And it was one of these just like, how did, what's happening here? How did this happen? But so that was again one of the runners up. But I truly believe my luckiest tick of the year, green-tailed towhee. Um, on December 30th of the year, so one day to go, it's already dark, day has passed, and Liam Singh shares, "Hey, someone just posted this on a naturalist. There's a green-tailed towhee in Beacon Hill." And I go, "Oh, that would be a really good bird to end the year off on. I really, really hope that stays around." So I'm there December 31st, last day of the big year. And I go to the bushy area. It had been seen before sunrise. I'm looking everywhere, looking around, looking around. And just as the sun starts to come up, I see this big blobby bird sitting up on a perch. And I go, "That's the green-tailed towhee." And so, take a quick look, go on my phone, text the rare bird alert, like, "Hey, it's here, it's still here, come on out. Great bird for Victoria." And I look up and there's a golden crowned sparrow on the perch. And I go, "Oh my God. I just misid'd that, like, the green-tailed towhee's not here. I've made a fool of myself. My last message to the rare bird alert of the whole year is me misiding something and looking like and I'm like, they're just mentally kicking myself and I watch the towhee fly up, body the sparrow, kick it off the perch and start calling on that. And I'm like, "Oh, thank God." Like it's here. And I mean, just the fact that it showed up on the 31st, it spent months after that. So the fact that someone found it with, one day to go of the big year is in and of itself, I think, a pretty massive stroke of luck. I spent the rest of that last day burdened with friends. I met up with Anne Nightingale at Goldstream to go make one final chance for Glaucoskull. I went out with some friends to the dump to do the same, but it was a really lovely last day of the big year. So with that. What number did that many kilometers, that many hours, that much effort get? We did not hit 275 for the year. I hit 286. So beat my goal by about 11 birds, which I am really, really proud of. There was a couple points there I was like, I don't know if 275 is in the cards. But yeah, no, it was like if there was one thing to take away from it, the power of community and people helping you to find birds has just skyrocketed. The number of people who shared rides with me, cooked me meals sometimes, gave me a couch to sleep on, helped me find birds. I mean, I had a guy who at the time I had never met before drive down from Comox to Port Alberni and spend 3 hours staking out a common grackle and finding out where it was spending time so that he was on it when I got there and he could show me. Like, just the amount of generosity in this community is unbelievable. And so, dude, that is truly my big takeaway. A lot of great birds on this island, a lot of great birders. And yeah, I'm not sure why oh yeah, I should have been saying that to this. Some of the birders who came out with me over the course of the year, people who helped me climb mountains, people who helped me plan for trips, people who showed me where birds could be found, kept me fed, built blinds and hissed at Pacific Martins, found the Hudsonian Godwood, for example. It was pretty remarkable. I truly feel I have a debt to this community that I will be paying for the rest of my life. And yeah, uh, beyond all that, I also have an enormous debt to my wife, who, it was funny, I had a lot of questions over the course of the year where I'd have some birders be like, "Oh, the old ball and chain," or, "Oh, she, how does the wife feel about this?" She supported me so thoroughly. I genuinely believe I could not have done this without her. Both in terms of like talking to me when I was like missing a bird, calling me, holding down the fort, helping make sure our pet dog and cat stayed healthy while I was ripping off all over the place, and just keeping me mentally healthy. Could truly, truly, and unironically, could not have done this without her. And yeah. So what's next? What's next is sleeping and recovering. I feel in many ways I am still mentally recovering from doing a big year, and I'm curious if you feel the same a decade on. Circling back, I one of the coolest things I found throughout the year, aside from meeting people, was seeing all these incredible corners of the island that I would often just have to passed through really quickly because I was looking for a ptarmigan or a rare shorebird, whatever. But I was saving pins the whole time, going, this is a place I'd love to come back to. And I've spent the 2 years since going back to those places. The map I showed before that showed the only part of the island I hadn't, only major part of the island I haven't been to is Cayucit. I actually was just spent the last week there, partially out of recognition of this, of like what part of the island haven't I experienced, doing black oyster catcher surveys with Cayuga Checklisset. So, as much as this made me love the birds of Vancouver Island, it made me appreciate how much more than birds we have on the island and how much there is to be seen. And then keep fundraising. I don't even know if I hit my $10,000 goal for the year. I'll be honest. We got a lot of donations, sold a lot of calendars, raised a lot of money. But the biggest thing that really came out of that in terms of fundraising was that was the year we started our partnership with Eagle Wing Tours. That all came out of just an email to the owner saying, like, we'd love to do this. Would you want to do some tours with us? And I know that's raised more than 10,000 for us now. So I don't know if it all happened within the 2024 calendar year, but we got some pretty cool stuff out of that year. For anyone who hasn't come on one of those, I highly recommend. I guide at least half of them in the year. We got 11 tours this year. It's a really good time to see some cool birds and raise some money. And then some thoughts I put down this week because I've given this talk a few times and I'm always thinking like what else is there to say is tips for future big years for others because I will not be doing another big year this side of the century. It was really fun, but whew, you know, um, I would recommend people seriously consider before they do a big year because if it's something you want to do, absolutely go for it. But there's a lot of stuff people don't think about. The mental health side, it is a lot to spend that much time on your own, driving, missing things that you thought you would see. If you're nervous about that, really really think about it. Make some appointments with a psychiatrist. Make sure you have a good social group behind you who can help you talk through things. The finances, like I said, I was only able to do this because I had a very accommodating job that both got me to places and had the flexibility through a work sharing agreement that I could take a time. I could take a Friday off and then work a Saturday type deal. But for many people who don't have that, it might be a real barrier. Your schedule. Think about, if can you spend a year being able to run off to Port Hardy on the drop of a hat? Is that the type of life you live? What kind of obligations do you have? Would you be willing to miss a friend's birthday if there was a really rare bird? I decided for my own big year, no, I didn't want to be a worse person at the end of my year than I felt I was going in. And so when it did happen that, for example, I was leading a community survey in Tofino when the citrine wagtail got found, and I realized, okay, if I bail on this survey, which I think they would understand, I can go try for the citrine wagtail, but that's not why I'm doing this year, right? Like I'm not out here just to get the highest number. I really think birding is a community endeavor. And I'm like, I'll go tomorrow after the community survey if it's still there. And it was a 1 day wonder, no citrine wagtail, but I really don't think I don't even know if I'd be giving this talk if I had done a year where I was gonna, bail on birthdays and community events and things like that. And then your relationship to birding, it's really worth considering. Doing this type of birding, chasing individual birds all the time, missing a lot of them, if you're not careful, can really reconfigure how you see birds and how you want to spend your time. I know people who, doing big years have ruined their relationship to birding because it stopped being fun. I'm really lucky it stayed fun for me. I kind of checked in with myself over the year of like, am I still happy? Do I still want to be doing this? And it was always a yes. But, there were a few points that got a little close there. Sharp-tailed sandpiper try number 4. But uh, but yeah, plan. Cannot be overemphasized. I would have loved to have known in 2023 I was doing a 2024 big year. But as soon as I started into it, spreadsheets, what species are possible, what time of year can they be seen, what areas should you aim to be in at different times of year? It's not all chasing. Sometimes it's stuff gets found during Tofino Shorebird Festival because there's a ton of birders there. You should be in Tofino for Tofino Shorebird Festival. That's when the snowy plover is going to show up, and it did. And then pelagics, so much of Vancouver Island is what's offshore. I spoke to Anne. I know there's a couple of species she could have picked up on the shelf. I had other stuff like lace-on albatross and flesh-footed shearwater that is pretty doable if I had been able to get on a couple more pelagics out to the shelf. Russell Cannings, for example, when he set the BC Big Year record, he ended up starting a Coast Guard community observer program and getting Murphy's petrel, or was it Murphy's or Hawaiian? One of the crazy Terradrama petrels, like 150 kilometers offshore or something crazy like that. So if you can plan ahead and find a way to get on those boats, there's a lot of good birds out there that I know both Ann and I missed. that could really get your numbers up. And then finally, community. I feel like a broken record at this point, but one of the really, really interesting things I find about the community aspect is comparing Ann and I's big year. I know from the numbers that Anne statistically worked harder at her big year than I did. Anne saw 90% of the birds that were reported in 2015, so 269 species out of 300. I saw 86% of the birds reported in 2024, so 286 out of, I think it was 334. And so it's only a 4% difference, but running the numbers, if you saw 90% of the birds that were seen in 2024, you would see 300 species, which, for reference, kind of previous to this, a lot of people didn't think was possible for Vancouver Island. I think with the number of people who are now reporting birds out there looking and immediately checking them on rare bird alerts, things like that, the stakes are raised. There's just so many more people out there looking. Um, Couches are a big part of community, places to stay, people to show you around, the kindness of strangers, and company. I know some people like birding alone, and I certainly like that to an extent. But you put 2,000 hours of birding in a year, you start to want to do it with a couple other people. Not to mention, Dave Bell, for example, with the American Golden Plover. I don't think I would have got that if I wasn't with him. And there's numerous birds like that where if I wasn't with others, if I wasn't following their tracks, there's no way I would have found it. And yeah, so think seriously before you do a big year. And if you decide you want to, I am fully behind you. And we'll grab a coffee sometime, and I'll help you figure out how to beat the record. But until then, questions?
Liam, that was absolutely unbelievable. Thank you for letting us know just how hard that was. 'Cause that hadn't actually occurred to me, but now I really have tremendous respect for you and Dan. As you say, she was out there on her own. I'd like to encourage anyone to put up your hand to ask a question or put it in the chat if there's anything you want to check in. I'm not seeing anything, Liam.
I see a question
Also,
from
Oh,
Ann there.
Anne's hand is up. Go,
so
Anne. Yeah.
yeah, I do want to say I totally commend Liam. He worked his butt off to get all those birds, and it was time for someone to attempt a Vancouver Island Big Year, and boy, he did such a great job of it, and saw lots of birds that I didn't, and boy, we commiserated over some of the misses. I feel his pain. I am delighted that he also came out of his big year still liking birds and uh, still wanting to be involved, because a lot of people quit early, because once you get into November, October, November, there's precious few birds to find, right? Like you get really lucky about that. Am I still there? My cat just turned something off.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yes, you're here.
Okay. So yeah, it can be very discouraging when you feel like I've got 2 months left and you're only going to get maybe three or four more birds, right? Or maybe none. So you have to get good in your mind that if this is all you have for the year, then you're going to be okay with that, right? That you're going to have to understand it. The months don't divide up evenly. Um,
No.
and I do have to say that the one time during your big year that I shook my head and went, I don't get it, was when I told you about that Costas hummingbird. And you said, oh, yeah, I'll see if I can get it on Friday. And I'm going, Liam, you got to get in the car. Like, go now. Fortunately, it did stick around, but that was a moment of disbelief on my part too.
Yep. That was I should have read that message a little more clearly. Yeah.
It was
I
also the
saw
best, one of the best years of my life, and I think you probably will feel the same way about yours.
absolutely. The funny thing about that cost is too, so got that cost is, very thankfully. And then we had another one in Jordan River that year. Like it was that sort of bet of it being a good bird year with it being an El Nino La Nina switch year really panned out. There were a ton of good birds on Vancouver Island in 2024.
Mhm.
No.
Liam, I'll just draw your attention to the chat. A question from Beth asking, I don't know if you can see that. Did you write this up with photos from all your birds? I'm
Yeah,
thinking
so
that too. There's a book here waiting to be written.
yes, I have thought a lot about doing a book about this afterwards. What is it? I had set out with the goal of doing a blog while I did this. And pretty quickly on realized if I'm going to do justice, like having, a wife and family and a job and doing this big year, something is going to have to give. And I think the blog makes the most sense. So I blogged the first 3 or 4 months and then was like, I'm going to let that go to the side. And I've tried to make up for that sort of lack of outreach through talks. I think this is my 10th talk or so that I've done now. As well as we did a calendar to fundraise money that included all the stories from 2024. And I really am thinking about doing a book at some point. I think if I were to do it, it would be less of a here's what I did in 2024 and more here's birding on Vancouver Island. I've talked to Keith Taylor about that, who wrote the previous the previous birding Vancouver Island back in I think early 2000. But really, again, just sort of taking everything the community has told me about how to bird this island, synthesizing it down, and making it, available to everyone because there are just so many cool little tips and tricks to find cool stuff and enjoy yourself while doing it. But yeah, any other
All
questions?
right. Well, I guess on behalf of, I see no other questions,
Cool.
but on behalf of everyone, thanks so much. Thanks for going and doing it and then telling us about it so we don't have to go do it. Much
Absolutely.
appreciated.
Thank you all for coming out. And, really truly, if you feel comfortable with it, think about making a donation to Rocky Point. They do a lot of really cool work, and it's more than just schmucks running around the island looking at rare birds. It's some pretty cool stuff happening.
Okay, thanks so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you for your attention. Hope to see you at one or more of the remaining events for Victoria Bird Week. Enjoy the week. Thanks, Liam.
Have a great evening.